They aimed a plane at the top of the world and decided landing there was a good idea. On May 3rd, 1952, Lieutenant Colonels Joseph O. Fletcher and William P. Benedict took off in a modified United States Air Force aircraft and flew toward a place that does not behave like anywhere else on Earth. The North Pole is not land. It's not stable. It's not even fixed in the way most people would imagine. It's a shifting mass of ice floating over deep ocean. It's constantly moving, constantly changing, and completely indifferent to any kind of human ambition. And yet, this is exactly where they decided they were going to go. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand the men involved and the time that they were living in. This was the early Cold War. Nations were quietly competing for dominance, not just in weapons, but in exploration, science, and prestige. Being first meant something. Being seen as first meant even more. William Pershing Benedict was not someone who approached danger cautiously. He had already proven that during World War II. Born in Nevada and raised in California, he joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1940 before the United States had even fully entered the war. He flew Spitfires over Europe, was later transferred to North America, and at one point he was shot down while flying a Hurricane. He survived parachuting to safety, which is not something that tends to leave a person with a fear of risk. Later, he transferred to the United States Army Air Forces. He flew P-40s and P-47s and rose through the ranks at a pace that would suggest both skill and a certain comfort with extreme chaos. Within 18 months, he was a major and a squadron commander. This man did not hesitate when presented with a difficult mission. Joseph Fletcher was different, but no less impressive. He was born in Montana and raised during the Dust Bowl years. He pursued meteorology. He studied at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. That's where Benedict brought combat experience. Fletcher brought precision analysis and a deep understanding of the atmosphere that they would be flying through. They had completely diverse backgrounds, but both of them were important. And that atmosphere mattered because the Arctic is not forgiving. Before the North Pole flight, Fletcher had already been involved in establishing a weather station on a floating iceberg in the Arctic Ocean. It was initially known simply as T3, later renamed Fletcher's Island Ice in his honor. Imagine building a scientific station on something that could, at any time, crack, drift, maybe even break apart. That's the kind of environment that these men were working in. So when the opportunity came up, it was not entirely unexpected. General Old, yes, Old, O-L-D, was a commander in the Alaskan Air Command. Remember, this is 1952. This is prior to Alaska becoming a United State. He was the commander of the Alaska Air Command. He wanted the United States Air Force to achieve something significant during his time. The idea was simple in theory and absurd in practice. He wanted the United States Air Force to land a plane at the geographic North Pole. Benedict was given command of the mission. The aircraft they used was a C-47 modified with skis. Of course, that detail matters. There was no runway waiting for them. People don't go up and hang out at the North Pole and just start randomly building runways. There was no prepared surface. There was just ice. It was unpredictable, uneven, and potentially unstable. As they flew north, the normal rules of navigation began to break down. Compasses became unreliable near the poles. Direction lose their meaning when that happens. East and west blur into something completely abstract. The closer you get, the stranger it becomes. When you're standing at the North Pole, I remember learning this as a little kid. when you're standing directly at the North Pole, no matter what direction you turn to walk, you are heading south, not east, not west. There is only one direction to go, no matter which direction you head. Let your brain wrap around that for a moment, and then you might start to understand how disorienting it is for these men. So then they have to worry about the landing. There is no dramatic runway moment. There's no lights that are going to be guiding them in. There's just this vast, blinding expanse of white. Benedict brought the aircraft down onto the ice carefully and deliberately, knowing that any kind of misjudgment could absolutely mean disaster and possibly even death. But somehow it worked. The plane settled onto the surface of the ice. The engines slowed, and for a moment, there was a stillness that probably felt unreal. They had actually done it. They stepped out onto the ice, into a place that had fascinated explorers for centuries. This was a geographic North Pole, not just a symbolic location, not Santa's workshop and village, not an estimate. This was the exact point where all lines of longitude converge. But they did not just take a few photos and call it a day. Scientists on board the plane conducted readings, measurements, verifications. They confirmed their position using data that removed absolutely all doubt. This was not a guess. This was precise. They became officially the first Americans to set foot at the exact geographic North Pole. And for a time, that seemed like the whole story. But history has a way of holding on to secrets. And remember, this is the Cold War. Years later, it was revealed that a Soviet expedition had already done it. In 1948, 4 solid years earlier, Soviet aircraft had landed at the North Pole. The United States had not known about it. The world had not widely known about it. The achievement had happened quietly, without the same level of recognition, really without any recognition. So Fletcher and Benedict were not the first humans to land there. They were the first Americans, though. That distinction might sound small, but in the context of the Cold War, this did matter. It also adds a layer of irony to the story. These men risked everything to achieve a first that had already been claimed, just without their knowledge. It does not diminish what they did, of course. If anything, it highlights how difficult the feat truly was. 2 separate nations, years apart, managed to accomplish something that seemed almost impossible. And after the mission, their lives continued in very different directions once more. Benedict eventually retired from the Air Force in 1962, but he did not choose a quiet life. Instead, he became a firefighting pilot in California, flying dangerous missions to drop fire retardant on active wildfires. It was work that required precision, courage, and a willingness to fly low in unpredictable conditions. Somehow this makes sense for his life. But in 1974, he died in a plane crash while doing exactly that. Fletcher left the Air Force in 1963, 1 year after Benedict. He continued working in meteorology, which also makes sense for his life. He held leadership positions, he contributed to scientific achievements, and he remained connected to that kind of work that had first taken him into the Arctic. This man lived until 2008, long enough to see how much the world had changed since his flight in 1952. And that moment still remains in history. 2 men, 1 plane, and a decision to land somewhere that does not belong to anyone. How do you claim a chunk of ice? The North Pole is not a place you can treat like solid ground. It shifts, it moves, it breaks apart, it reforms. It exists in a constant state of change, which makes the achievement even more remarkable. They landed on something that does not stay still, in a place that does not follow the usual roles, and proved that human determination can push into even the most uncertain environments. But there's also something else to the story. It's not just about being the first. It's about trying anyway. You don't have to be the first to still accomplish something amazing. Even when they believed they were the first, and even after learning they were not, what they accomplished didn't change. The risks they took were real. The skill they used were real. The moment was real. And that's how often history operates. It's not about always being as clean as we want it to be. It's not about having a clear line from first to second steps. Sometimes it's overlapping efforts, hidden achievements, and discoveries that come too late to change the narrative. But the story still matters. So here's the question I want you to think about, and I want you to answer this in the comments. I always love hearing and reading your comments. If you had the chance to do something extraordinary, something maybe even dangerous, something that might make history, would you still do it if you knew someone else might have already done it first? I think I would, just to say that I did. And of course, if you enjoy stories like this, make sure you follow the Facebook page for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments. And of course, subscribe to the History Happens podcast so you never miss an episode.